series Talking Success, connecting the global fintech community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'm chatting with Fiona Roach Canning, co-founder and chief product and marketing officer at Pollinate. Pollinate provides a cloud-based services platform that allows merchants to onboard customers, create e-commerce portals, and offer loyalty programs without having to perform migrations. Just with that mouthful of a title, I feel like you have a lot on your plate. How's your day been?
Stacey, firstly, thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be chatting today. There is a lot going on at the moment, but I think as Pollinate's moved to working remotely, we're now in the groove of doing that. We're kind of 5 months into that now, and we're a lot more efficient than we were before. And I think in the UK over August, the team has all managed to have a little bit of downtime as well, because I think we've all been struggling a little bit with when to switch off, what with being in our homes and often having our laptops in our bedrooms.
How have you found that balance? How was that for you personally?
Look, don't get me wrong. The first 4 weeks were really super hard. I've got 2 little kids, 5 and 7. And we normally are incredibly lucky. We have a great support network. My husband runs his own charity, but we have a nanny, we have a cleaner, the boys were in school, we have 4 very involved grandparents. We're incredibly lucky with our support network. And overnight that all disappeared. So there was this brilliant cartoon that I sent to somebody when they said, "How are you doing?" that showed a woman with about 8 arms, like an octopus. And you had one arm cooking dinner, another one trying to homeschool on Zoom, another one trying to do your own conference call on Zoom whilst cleaning your house and arranging your logistics and checking up on your family to check they're okay. Yeah, the first 4 weeks were super hard.
Doesn't that make you just realize that as humans, we can be thrown anything and somehow come out on the other side and just surprise ourselves in general?
I think so. I think, though, again, and I can only speak personally, but I struggled with a lack of emotional resilience during that time. So yes, I was superficially coping, and yes, everything was fine. But then if anything went out of place in the system, so for example, if one of the kids got sick or if the school changed their homeschooling schedule, all of a sudden I would burst into tears. It's like, where is my resilience? And the other thing I found really interesting was that some people had a lot more time. So time was like gold dust for me during that first kind of 8 to 12 week period. But some people actually had a lot more time. So I had some friends or some colleagues kind of being like, "Oh, I've done all this thinking and I've got these great ideas and I want to talk about it." And I'm like, "Do you know what? I don't even have time to read your text message with your great idea in it." But now I feel that everything, at least for now in the UK, is a little bit more stable. We're starting to look forward as to how things change as we start to come out of this. Our schools are reopening next week. We're looking, as a lot of companies are, at our central London office space and thinking, look, it's obviously not a full-time Monday to Friday office for 120 people anymore, but how can we use that incredible space to allow people to come together and collaborate in the best way?
I love that. I'm excited to hear your story. Can you please just tell me about your journey to building your career and how you ended up co-founding Pollinate and becoming the chief product and marketing officer? I want to hear it all.
Okay, of course. Well, look, I'm not one of those people who had a life plan on a fridge. I know that some people do. But for me, it's always been a process of discovery that really only makes sense when you look at it backwards. So going forward, it's trying to find that intersection of what you enjoy and what you're good at. And so I went to a comprehensive school. I studied maths at university, and I came out of university in the dot-com boom in the 2000s and went into a management consultancy that was doing big things in the dot-com space.
Okay.
So they were helping found the first internet bank in the UK, which was called Egg. Wow. And it was a wonderful time to go into consultancy because you get a lot of responsibility early on. And because it was in that dot-com boom, it wasn't like there were 20 projects like that had been done similarly before and you were just following a cookie cutter approach. You were genuinely trying to work out how the internet was going to change consumer behavior, what people were going to be comfortable doing online, what the benefit was going to be to them. So
Right.
that was super exciting. I then went to another consultancy because I wanted to focus more on the customer behavior and behavioral science aspect of consulting rather than the kind of spreadsheet aspect of it. And then I got to that point that I think a lot of people get to in consulting, maybe 8 years in, where you have to decide if consulting is your life or not. And I wanted to try actually going industry side and owning something myself. And I ended up taking a job at Visa, and I went there because I was fascinated by this idea that you can learn a lot about people by what they spend.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about who has data on what people spend, it's the payment companies.
Yeah.
And so I spent 3 years at Visa in the strategy and insight function, really across Europe. And again, it was a fascinating time to join Visa. So this was maybe 2006, 2007. And Visa Europe had just split away from Visa International. So again, it was in this formation of a company, kind of what processes do we need to put in place? Who are we as a company? What value do we add to our banks? So I had great fun for 3-4 years playing with that data, trying to understand what value a payment card adds in people's lives. And then I got married during that time as well, and was finding that a lot of my friends were getting married and moving to the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in the suburbs. The suburbs terrify me.
Why?
Oh, I don't know. It feels like you either want to be in the country or you want to be in a city.
Are you naturally a country girl? Like, where do you feel the most comfortable?
Oh, good Lord, no. I'm actually a city person. I don't know if you saw, but there was a Seinfeld article this week out on LinkedIn and all over the place where he's challenging the death of New York. And he's talking about the amazing power of energy you get when you get people together in the same space and how that can never be recreated virtually. And, you know, I feel that. I've lived in London, I've lived in New York, and that energy you get from cities, for me, is like nothing else.
I get that. For me, I just love nature. I like the combination. So LA was lovely. You had like mountains, beaches, but then also a city. For me, just being in a concrete jungle is a teeny bit too much. Teeny bit.
Oh, completely agree with you. So look, if I live in the city, I want to live on a park. I want to live on the river. I want to go out into the countryside. So water is really important to me. So,
Same.
So whether it's looking at the Thames or whether it's driving out to the seaside or being on a lake, I mean,
Love that.
being on water is what allows me to think and actually understand what I should be focusing my energy on rather than all the busyness that can crowd your mind.
I connect to that.
I'm really lucky. We have a 50-meter outdoor pool about a 3-minute walk from my house. So I try and swim
Beautiful.
3 or 4 times a week.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, anyway, suburbs, terrifying.
Yes.
That's the point. But so my husband and I decided we were going to move abroad. And we didn't really mind where. I quite fancied India. But he worked in quite a niche field at the time. So I said, look, you find a job, as long as it's not on this short list of countries that I don't want to go to, you find a job and then I'll follow. So we ended up in New York and that was incredible. New York has an amazing energy and you've got water all around you. Yeah, it's incredible. And I went back to consulting then. I got into innovation consulting and the whole idea of lean startup and minimum viable product and the idea of having a group of customers that co-create your product with you, which was an amazing learning experience about the importance of speed to market, continuous innovation. So love that. I'm still on my journey, right?
Yes.
This is the problem with having been working for 20 years.
No, I love this. I love the detail. I want to hear it. I said I want to hear it all and I meant it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, look, so then we've been in New York 5 years. I'd had my first son by that point. And you can extend your visa twice at that time in the US. And then you have to apply for a green card. And neither my husband or I were sure enough that our long-term future lay in the US, that we wanted to get a green card. So we started looking at coming back to the UK. We also really wanted our grandparents to be more involved in our children's lives, and it's hard when you're, however many thousand miles, I think it's 4,000 miles away across the water.
Yeah.
And I also discovered that there was something really important about being British that I hadn't really experienced until I tried to bring a child up in another country. And it's hard to define what it was, but I really wanted my child to have that. So I started looking at coming back to the UK, and I met the CEO of Nectar, the UK's largest loyalty company.
Yes.
When I was out in New York, we had a lunch together that turned into a dinner, and we were discussing the business. And he said, look, I'd love to come have you join and bring that kind of customer-centric angle to Nectar. And I said, you know what, I'm not that interested. Nectar is this kind of old fuddy-duddy card. You send out vouchers to people 4 times a year. I really want to stay in this kind of fast digital space. And then he talked about the digital transformation that he wanted to drive through at Nectar, and how it was a data company at its heart, how they were pushing out an app, and he wanted to use data science to make sure the right person was getting the relevant and rewarding offers to them at the right time. And I was like, okay, actually, that's super interesting, and I'd love to be involved in that. And then I paused, and I think I can only speak for myself, but I think when you've had one child and you're trying for a second, it's hard to then come back and take a kind of exec job without being honest about that. That's just speaking very personally.
Okay.
And so I said to him, look, I've got a child. We're trying for another. I've had a couple of miscarriages, but we're trying right now. And I don't know if it feels right to take the job without telling you that.
Yeah.
And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said, I want you to work with us for 5 years, 10 years. I'm interested in you helping me build this company in the longer term. Wow. So absolutely wonderful you're trying for a baby. I really hope that happens for you in the near term, and I'd still love you to come and work for us. And
that's so important.
Oh my God, it was so important to me in that time. So I came back, I joined Nectar as Chief Customer Officer, helped go through that whole digital transformation, again, playing with a wealth of data and understanding people from where they chose to spend their money and how you can influence them with different offers and loyalty components. Had a second child, so we had our second son. And then I'd been at Nectar about 4 years, and I was looking for a new challenge, and I wanted to start consulting again. And I was approached by Google, who were looking to set up their own loyalty scheme in Southeast Asia for their Android store, about whether I could help consult on that project and about how to make a really powerful digital loyalty program. And so I said, yes, of course.
It's Google.
And spent 3 months consulting on that project, where I was a week in the UK working California hours and then a week in California.
Oh my. Oh my.
That's probably the most punishing work schedule I've ever done, actually. And bear in mind, my husband runs an international education charity and was probably traveling every other week. So I think we saw each other for days during the month in that period.
Oh my.
And so it was fascinating. I did the project. I thought about taking a full-time role, but it didn't feel like the right time to move the family back to California again. And then I met, completely serendipitously actually, the head of RBS Ventures, who was talking about re-entering the merchant acquiring space, helping small businesses take payments and use that payment data to better understand their customers, better serve their customers. And he said, look, there's a guy that's going to do this, you should meet him. And we went for a walk along the canal in Angel, and he laid out for me this vision for how banks could completely transform their merchant acquiring experience for small businesses using the data and using loyalty. And I think it's always that combination of a brilliant idea and brilliant people. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, that would totally work, and I would love to do that with you. And that was, I think, October 2017, and that led to the co-founding of Pollinate.
I love that. I have so many questions just buzzing in my head, and I'm so excited to hear all these answers. In the beginning, you spoke about learning a lot from what people spent at Visa. Where did this fascination initially come from, and then what sorts of things did you learn?
So I have a maths degree. My mum's a maths teacher. My dad worked for British Airways when we were growing up. And so I think there was always a lot of data and maths in our household, just generally. And I noticed that in my household with my children as well. Like, a child asks a question, and as an adult, you can take that question in lots of different ways. And you're always thinking about what do I want to kind of teach my child? What do I want to show them? So I think growing up, there was always a lot of maths in my household, and I was always fascinated by numbers. With my father working for British Airways, we also had a very privileged childhood where I travelled a lot. So I don't know the UK that well, because when all of my friends were going on caravanning holidays somewhere in England, we would be going to the airport and we would have a suitcase packed for either hot or cold weather. And then we'd look at the departure board and talk about where there were 4 seats on a flight. And then we would get on a flight to somewhere.
Thrilling.
So yeah, that's how I grew up. And I kind of thought that was normal. And I think, so I've been to about 80 countries now, and I'd probably been to 60 of those before I was 18.
Wow.
And so I think being in different contexts and observing different cultures and how people interact and how they spend and how the economy worked, I just found that really fascinating from an early age. And I think for me, I talked early on about that intersection of what you enjoy and what you're good at. And for me, it's that intersection of the kind of numeracy and logic with the creativity and storytelling. Look, you can learn a really alarming amount about somebody from their spend, and there's a lot of very important legislation now to make sure that data is only used with consent and only used for the purpose it was intended. But if you look at somebody's bank statements, you can probably tell if they have children, how many children they have, what school those children go to, if they have a car, actually exactly what car that is, when they bought it, the mileage consumption on that car. You can learn, are they environmentally conscious? Are they price sensitive? Do they value quality or value? You can really profile somebody very easily from their spend data.
That is such a thrilling upbringing, and I relate to it quite a bit. I grew up all over the world, and I think it's a massive part of who I am. My father was the reason we traveled, and I always noticed the different responses I would yell when I would say we lived abroad because of my dad's work, versus a friend who went to my school who would say it's because of her mother's job. There's this stereotype that a woman should be looking after her kids and be home, not necessarily traveling all the time. And your work includes quite a bit of traveling. And we were chatting about how it's actually one of your favorite parts of work. Do you ever feel judged as a mother for pursuing your dream and not being that stereotypical mom?
So look, I can only answer that personally rather than generically about all women. But
Yeah.
look, personally, I think you're always your own harshest judge. You're always your own harshest critic.
Yeah.
And something that's really important to me in life generally, but especially as a parent, is knowing what trade-offs you're making and what is important to you. And sometimes it's really hard to know what's important to you. I found, especially when I had my children, because you've got a lot of societal pressure and pressure from those closest to you, your friends and your family, trying to tell you what they think you think is important.
Yeah.
And that process of stripping back those layers to say, no, actually, this is my truth. This is who I am. And I think that I'm a better mother, wife, executive, because I'm making these life choices and I understand the trade-offs. It's a really, really hard process to go to. But it's really important that everybody does that individually and truthfully.
That's really, really interesting because people always think you have to choose, right? But one can actually lead into you being a better mother, whether you're happy, whether you take time for yourself, whether you reach your career goals, that actually in turn teaches your kids that a man and a woman don't have to fit those norms too. I think that could be a really good educational moment for kids as well. So I really think that's really awesome. I'm also curious to know, how did you juggle everything? We spoke about this in the beginning of the podcast, just that meme of a woman with multiple different arms, finding that work-life balance. For somebody who's currently maybe struggling with this, do you have any tips?
Yeah, it's really hard. So give yourself a break, I guess, would be my first tip.
Okay.
Second, I would say believe in yourself. So I think, especially when you're juggling a lot and you're thinking, I'm not giving something my sole focus, and especially as a woman, I think imposter syndrome is really real.
Yeah.
But believe in yourself, champion yourself, be brave. But look, it's a journey, so embrace the twists and turns. For me, at least, and again, I can only speak personally, a career path and a life path isn't linear. And sometimes you're focusing more on your career and your work. Sometimes you're focusing more on your family. And that's fine. And something that might feel like forever when you've maybe got a couple of small children and you're at home on maternity leave, actually is a very short time in what can be a 50-year career.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
I guess the final thing, and again, this is personal rather than anything beyond that, is choose your partner well. So I'm very lucky in that my partner shares everything. He probably does more childcare right now than I do. He certainly does more housework because I'm appallingly bad at housework. He actually does more cooking as well. I'm starting to wonder what I'm bringing to the relationship. But no, and he does this while running his own education charity full time.
Wow.
But, you know, be with somebody who respects you, who believes in you, who shares that burden and that journey with you.
I love that. Did you suffer much from imposter syndrome?
Oh, God, all the time.
How do you get through that? That's something we had a whole podcast dedicated to this topic. We had a career coach, but I'm really curious to know personally, is that something, and even if you're currently struggling with it, how do you get past that?
It's a great question, and I do struggle with it. I struggle with it all the time in, I think, every single role I've ever had. And I think, I don't know, maybe for some people it does go away as you get more senior in your roles, but it hasn't for me. Because I think if every time you get more senior in a role, you're then interacting with kind of more senior people, and you look at them and you think, oh my goodness, I still feel like I'm 7 years old dressing up in my mother's dresses. But I think again, it goes back to believing in yourself and taking that time to reflect the experiences that you've had, and that you do know a lot more than you think. I think it's great to have great mentors as well, and great coaches. And coaches and mentors can play a really important role in helping you understand where you do have expertise and where you do add value, and also helping you build that confidence to express it.
I love that. I'm taking notes. Something that we've also spoken about a lot over the last couple of months, about women being asked about their kids, amongst other irrelevant gender-based questions in interviews. How has Pollinate changed their interview process to create gender equality? And what are other ideas businesses can implement to drive that gender equality in the workplace?
Another great question, and so important. I actually think one of the things about COVID-19 is that the lines between people's work and personal lives have had to blur. And I think it's lovely when I'm on a call and I see someone's child, or they say, excuse me, I have to just go and settle the baby. I think it's also forced some more equality that I've seen, because all of a sudden you've got two adults working full time, and they've got children that they have to look after, and they just have to do it very logically, and they have to say, okay, well, I'll take the morning and you take the afternoon, and then we'll both work into the evenings. And so I've seen quite a few examples of where I think there has been more of an understanding of the burden that is childcare amongst people who maybe hadn't seen it so much before. But then specifically on Pollinate, we So diversity and inclusion in all forms is really important to us. I think any company would say that. We tried for a long time to do blind CVs. And actually, we found that really hard because of LinkedIn. Because you get sent a piece of paper, but then actually there's so much more detail on LinkedIn that you naturally go to LinkedIn and then you see the photo of the person right there. I personally won't interview for a role unless I have a balanced applicant pool for that role. And so I wait until I have that pool until I will start interviewing. And sometimes it's really hard to get a balanced set of applicants in that pool. But we have a great in-house recruiter who goes out and trawls LinkedIn for people, approaches people who might not think that they should apply for a role to encourage them to apply for a role. And then we make sure that we fully interview. And we have a performance management framework that values the what as much as the how. And we have a set of values that are very much about kind of collectiveness and bringing positive energy and going on a journey with people to a destination. And valuing that as highly as the what, I think helps balance out people whose contribution might be more team-based or more kind of quiet, but they're just getting on with it in the background. It's a great question. And I think just to clarify, a balanced applicant pool for me doesn't necessarily mean it has to be 50-50, but it just means that there has to be diversity in gender, in race, across the applicant pool.
Is it just a personal, is it something that personally matters to you, something that you experienced, which then has led you to believe that this is really important before we even go to the next stage? I want this to be done in the first step.
So I think for me, it's the only way that you end up getting diversity in an organization is making sure you have diversity of applications. And I guess the parallel I draw is back to children in a comprehensive school who might never think that they can go to university because nobody in their family has gone to university. And I have this thing where you can't be what you can't see. And so having role models who look like you and who you can think, yes, I can be that person. I can see how they've taken their journey and I can see how I could go on a journey like that is so important. And so talking to school children, especially comprehensive school children, about, look, you have all of these options open to you and this is what the world looks like. And it's so important now because can you imagine coming out of university into the world that these 21-year-olds are coming out into right now, where unemployment is rising, the availability of jobs, it's just really hard to get. Helping people understand, okay, I could do this and this is how I need to present myself and this is what people are looking for, is just so important.
That was a massive driving force behind the creation of this podcast. Last year, we wrote a white paper that included the stories of female influences in the payment space. The positive response that we got from that made us realize the importance of having diverse voices on this platform. We hope that listeners hear stories like yours and feel encouraged that they too can reach their dreams no matter their gender or race. And I know it sounds cheesy, but we really do need to see or hear voices that look like us or resemble things that we've been through.
Absolutely. And one other thing that's really important to me is we always pay for our internships. I've seen quite a lot of talk on LinkedIn at the moment about kind of, it's a great time to scoop up really good candidates at under market value. And like, oh no, you've got to pay people what they're worth, and you've always got to pay internships because otherwise you're cutting out that opportunity for people who could otherwise not afford it. It annoys me a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Fiona, thank you so much for being on this podcast. It's always a pleasure getting to chat to you. We both can chat for hours and hours, the two of us. So thank you again. And where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
I feel like I've mentioned LinkedIn a lot on this podcast, but it is LinkedIn. And I would love anybody who's interested to reach out. So please do.
Thanks so much again.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you for listening to Talking Success, connecting the global fintech community. Feel free to follow us on Instagram at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent or you yourself are looking for a new exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.